Grace's hand didn't shake as she held out the $10 bill. "I don't need your pity, sir." 4 words. That's all it took to crack open a $2.4 billion fortune. The elderly man in the earth-toned hat froze, his weathered fingers hovering over the red vinyl booth. Benjamin Hale, founder of Hale Industries, destroyer of competitors, builder of empires, had just been rejected by a waitress in a Chicago diner. And the shock on his face, that was worth more than any tip he'd ever left. Around them, the lunch rush buzzed with clinking silverware and muffled conversations. 3 older men in plaid shirts watched from nearby booths, their coffee cups paused mid-sip. The half-full wine glass on Benjamin's table caught the afternoon light streaming through the window, casting amber shadows across his plate of untouched food. Grace stood firm, her yellow uniform crisp despite 6 hours on her feet, her ponytail perfect even after serving 40 tables that morning. She'd been watching him all afternoon, the way he'd snapped his fingers to get her attention, the condescending tone when he ordered, the deliberate mess he'd made with sugar packets just to see her clean it up. And then the tip, $10, on a $127 bill, but it wasn't about the money. It was the way he'd slid it across the counter, slow, deliberate, with that smile that said, "I'm doing you a favor." Benjamin cleared his throat, his surprise morphing into something harder. "Excuse me? You heard me." Grace's voice carried just enough to turn heads. "This isn't charity. I earn my wage serving you. If you can't afford a proper tip, that's fine. But don't insult me by pretending $10 is generosity." The diner held its collective breath. In the kitchen, someone dropped a spatula. At the register, Maria's hand froze over the credit card machine. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its volume, as if Sinatra himself wanted to hear what came next. Grace had woken up that morning to an eviction notice slipped under her apartment door. 30 days. She'd counted the bills in her wallet, $47.23, enough for gas and maybe ramen for the week. Her phone had 17 missed calls from debt collectors. Her car was making a sound like a dying animal every time she turned left. She needed that $10. God, did she need it, but she needed her soul more. Before we dive in, drop your city in the comments. We'd love to know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story like this. Now let's continue. Grace Thompson hadn't always been a waitress. 3 years ago, she'd worn pressed blazers and clicked through hospital corridors in heels that cost a week's wages. She'd had a desk with a nameplate, a 401k, and a future that looked like a straight line pointing up. Then came the lump. Small. Barely noticeable. The kind of thing you tell yourself is nothing while making a doctor's appointment just to be sure. Thyroid cancer. Stage 2. Treatable, they said. Survivable, they promised. What they didn't mention was the cost. Not just the money, though that came in waves that drowned her, but the cost of fighting, of waking up every morning to choose survival over surrender, of watching your savings evaporate like morning mist, of learning that health insurance has fine print written in invisible ink. She'd fought, won, survived, and lost everything else in the process. The hospital job went first, too many sick days, too much disruption. The apartment followed when the medical bills piled higher than her ability to pay. Her boyfriend left with a text message. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." Her friends stopped calling when she stopped being able to meet them for drinks she couldn't afford. Cancer didn't just attack her thyroid. It attacked her entire life, leaving her standing in the ruins wondering how survival could feel so much like defeat. But it taught her something too. It taught her that dignity doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you refuse to lose. So when Benjamin Hale slid that $10 bill across the counter with his smug smile and his expensive watch, Grace saw something she recognized. She saw someone who'd forgotten that money can't buy what matters. Someone who thought wealth made him wise. Someone who needed to remember that every person has a story, and just because he couldn't see hers didn't mean it wasn't written in scars. What Grace didn't know, what no one in that diner knew, was that Benjamin Hale came here every Friday. Same booth, same order, same test. For 3 years, he'd been searching for something, someone, a person who wouldn't bow, wouldn't scrape, wouldn't look at his custom Italian leather shoes and see dollar signs. He'd found plenty of people eager to take his money. His ex-wife had walked away with $300 million and a new husband half her age. His business partners smiled while they calculated their percentages, shaking his hand while planning their exits. His son, Richard, ran through money like water through fingers, calling every few months with a new investment opportunity that always ended in disaster. His daughter, Elizabeth, sent birthday cards written by her assistant and Christmas gifts selected by her personal shopper. But Grace Thompson, she was handing his money back. Benjamin's morning had started like every morning for the past 4 months, with pills, 7 of them, each a different color, each fighting a battle they were slowly losing. The oncologist's voice still echoed in his head. 6 months. Maybe 8 if we're aggressive with treatment. He'd laughed, actually laughed. I built an empire in less time than that. But you can't negotiate with cancer. Can't buy your way out. Can't threaten it with lawyers or hostile takeovers. It just sits there in your pancreas, quiet and patient, counting down the days like a bomb with a timer you can't see. So he'd started visiting diners, testing people, looking for something Sarah would have recognized. His wife dead 23 years now, but still the only person who'd ever really seen him, really known him. Not Benjamin Hale, billionaire, just Ben, the scared kid from Pittsburgh with dreams bigger than his wallet and love deeper than his pockets. "Keep it," Benjamin said, his voice dropping low. "You'll need it more than I do." The insult hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Grace's jaw tightened. She could feel the weight of the other waitresses watching from behind the counter. Maria, who had 3 kids and worked doubles to keep them in the good school district. Denise, who was putting herself through nursing school, one $4 tip at a time. Jenny, who was saving to bring her mother over from El Salvador. They all knew what $10 meant when you made $2.13 an hour plus tips. When your feet screamed after 8 hours standing. When you smiled at customers who treated you like furniture and thanked them for the privilege of serving. But they also knew what dignity cost. "Sir," Grace said, placing the bill deliberately on his table, each movement measured and calm. "I've been on my feet since 5 this morning. I've served you with respect, refilled your water 3 times without being asked, and brought your steak back to the kitchen twice because you wanted it less medium, more medium rare. I did my job well. What I won't do is accept charity from someone who thinks money makes him better than me." She turned to walk away. "Wait," Benjamin's voice had changed. The edge was gone, the condescension melted away. In its place sat something raw, curious, almost hopeful. Grace stopped but didn't turn around. She'd learned long ago that showing your back to someone was the ultimate statement of power. It said, "You don't scare me, you don't control me, I choose when this conversation ends." "What's your name?" "Grace Thompson." "Grace," he rolled the name around like he was tasting wine, testing its weight. "Do you know who I am? A customer who can't tip properly." The 3 men in plaid burst out laughing. Even the cook poked his head through the kitchen window to see who had the guts to talk to Benjamin Hale, T-H-A-T Benjamin Hale, like he was just another difficult customer complaining about his eggs. Benjamin leaned back, and for the first time in 3 years he smiled. A real smile. Not the calculated boardroom smile he used to close deals or the practice smile for charity galas. This one reached his eyes, crinkling the weathered skin at the corners, lighting up his face like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Sit down, Grace Thompson. I'm working. I'll tip you $1,000 for 5 minutes of your time." Grace finally turned, looked him dead in the eye, saw not a billionaire or a test or a problem, just an old man tired and alone trying to prove something to himself. "Sir, I just told you I don't want your pity money." "This isn't pity. This is," he paused, searching for the word, "curiosity." Against every instinct screaming at her to walk away, Grace slid into the booth across from him. The red vinyl squeaked under her weight. She kept her hands visible on the table, fingers laced together, posture straight. Her mama, dead now 5 years from the same kind of cancer Grace had beaten, had taught her to never look small even when you felt like it. Especially then. 5 minutes, she said. Then I have other tables. Benjamin studied her face like she was a painting in a gallery, like he was trying to memorize the angles, the shadows, the story written in the lines around her eyes. "How old are you?" 32. "Married? That's personal. No ring, so no," he gestured to her uniform. "How long have you worked here?" 4 years. "And before that?" Grace's fingers tightened slightly, the only tell that he'd hit something tender. "Why does it matter?" Humor an old man who doesn't have much time left for anything else. The way he said it, matter of fact, almost casual, made Grace look at him differently. She saw the slight yellow tint to his eyes, the way his expensive jacket hung a little too loose on his frame, the tremor in his hands that had nothing to do with age. "I worked at a hospital, Northwestern Memorial," Administrative assistant. Good job, health insurance. Retirement plan. Future, her voice stayed flat, factual, like she was reading someone else's biography. I got sick. Medical bills piled up. Lost the job while I was recovering. Couldn't make rent. Couldn't make car payments. Couldn't make the minimum on my credit cards. Here we are. What were you sick with? Cancer, thyroid, caught it early, thank God, still cost me everything except my life. Some days I'm not sure that was the trade I would have made if I'd known the price. The honesty of that last sentence surprised her. She didn't usually admit that. Didn't usually let people see that survival sometimes felt like a consolation prize. The diner sounds faded into background noise. Benjamin reached for his wine glass but didn't drink. Just held it, watching the liquid catch the light, seeing something in its amber depths that Grace couldn't see. My wife died of cancer, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of decades. 23 years ago, pancreatic, 6 months from diagnosis to, he trailed off. The bills bankrupted us, everything we'd built together gone. Every cent we'd saved, every dream we'd made. I had to borrow money from her brother just to bury her. Had to swallow my pride, hold out my hand, beg for help to give my wife a decent grave. Grace's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, don't be. It made me what I am. His voice hardened again, but there was brittleness to it now, like ice cracking under weight. I rebuilt, fought, clawed my way to the top, made sure money would never have power over me again. Made sure I'd never have to beg, never have to choose between pride and survival. And now you use it to have power over everyone else. The words landed like a slap. Benjamin set down his glass. Excuse me? You heard me. Grace leaned forward, and in that moment the waitress disappeared. In her place sat someone who'd looked death in the face and bargained for more time. Someone who'd lost everything and rebuilt from ash. Someone who understood that the deepest wounds don't show. You walk in here every week with your expensive jacket and your judgment, leaving insulting tips like you're teaching us some kind of lesson. You think you're testing people, finding out who's worthy. You're just a bully with a bank account. You're taking your pain, your loss, your grief, your anger at a world that took your wife, and you're weaponizing it against people who can't fight back. That $10, that's not a test. That's you trying to make yourself feel big by making us feel small. The color drained from Benjamin's face. Then rushed back, red and hot, climbing his neck like a thermometer measuring fury. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? Grace's voice rose slightly, not enough to cause a scene, but enough that the 3 men in plaid leaned closer to hear. Let me guess, you tell yourself you're teaching people about hard work, about earning things, about not being greedy. You're looking for someone who values integrity over money, right? Someone like your wife was. Someone who wouldn't take advantage, someone worthy of all you've built. Benjamin said nothing. His silence was answer enough. But really, Grace continued, her voice softening but not gentling. You're just angry that the world took something from you that money couldn't save, angry that all your billions can't bring her back, angry that you built an empire and have no one who really loves you to share it with. So now you're taking it out on people who can't fight back, people like me, people who are just trying to survive another shift, another day, another month. Benjamin stood abruptly. The wine glass wobbled, spilling red across the white tablecloth like blood, like all the things he'd never said bleeding out into the open. I've given millions to charity, built schools, funded hospitals, created 10,000 jobs, I've changed lives. And you can't tip a waitress 20%. The silence that followed could have stopped traffic, could have frozen the Earth's rotation, could have made the universe hold its breath. Benjamin's hands trembled, not with anger, with something deeper, something that looked suspiciously like shame, like recognition, like a man seeing himself clearly for the first time in decades, and not liking what he found. He sat back down slowly, heavily, like the weight of his 72 years and $2.4 billion, and crushing loneliness had suddenly caught up to him all at once. My wife was a waitress, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. When I met her, that's how we met actually, she served me coffee at a diner just like this one, in Pittsburgh, spring of 1973. I was 22 years old with dreams bigger than my wallet and not a dollar to my name that wasn't borrowed. Grace remained silent, watching as decades of memory played across his weathered face. I left her a quarter on a $2 check because it was all I had, literally all. I'd counted my change 3 times to make sure I could afford the coffee. The quarter was supposed to be bus fare home. He smiled then, sad and distant. Sarah, that was her name, she chased me down the street, 5 blocks, in her uniform and her work shoes. She was out of breath, mad as hell, and she shoved that quarter back into my hand and said, "I don't need your pity, kid. Save your bus fare." Grace felt something shift in her chest. Understanding. Connection. I fell in love with her right there on the sidewalk. This fierce, proud woman who'd rather walk home tired than take money from someone who needed it more. We got married 6 months later. $43 between us and dreams of building something beautiful. "And you did," Grace said softly. "We did, together. Every dollar I made, she was there. Every risk I took, she supported. Every failure, she picked me up. She kept me humble, kept me human. Reminded me that the measure of a man isn't his bank account, it's his character." "So what happened?" Grace asked, though she already knew. "Why the tests? Why the cruel tips?" Benjamin's eyes were wet now, though no tears fell. "After she died, after I'd made my first million, then 10 million, then 100. I looked around and realized everyone wanted something from me. My business partners wanted my money. My children wanted their inheritance. Women wanted my bank account. No one saw me. No one saw Ben, the kid from Pittsburgh who'd loved a waitress so much he gave her his bus fare." He took a shaky breath. "So I started coming to diners, testing people, looking for someone like her, someone who wouldn't bow. Someone who had dignity worth more than dollars, someone who would hand back money rather than compromise themselves." He looked at Grace with raw honesty. "I've been coming here every Friday for 3 years, testing waitresses, testing integrity. And until today, until you everyone took the $10 and smiled." "There's something else," Benjamin said. "Something you should know before this goes any further." Grace waited. "I'm dying, pancreatic cancer, same as Sarah. The doctors say it's poetic, I say it's justice. 6 months they gave me, that was 4 months ago." He touched his full white beard absently, as if checking that he was still solid, still real, still here. "Every morning I wake up and count the days I have left. Every night I go to sleep wondering if I've done enough good to balance out the harm. And every Friday I come here, looking for someone to give it all to, someone who deserves it." The weight of his words settled over the table like snow. "Why me?" Grace asked. "Why not you?" "I'm nobody. I serve coffee and take orders and clean up other people's messes. I'm drowning in debt. I'm 1 month from being homeless. You're someone who stood up to a billionaire when you had every reason to stay quiet. You chose dignity over dollars. You looked at a man who could change your life and said, 'I don't need your pity.'" Benjamin leaned forward. "Do you know what most people would have done with that $10 bill? Taken it because they needed it. Exactly. They would have smiled, said thank you, and thought whatever they wanted to think. They would have survived, but you didn't just survive. You lived, you stood on principle when principle was all you had. That's not desperation. That's character. That's the kind of person Sarah would have recognized. The kind of person who remembers that some things are worth more than money." Grace felt tears building behind her eyes. She blinked them back. "You don't know me, you don't know what I've done, what I've compromised, the times I haven't been strong." "None of us are strong all the time," Benjamin said. "But when it mattered, when a man with billions tried to diminish you, you stood tall. That's enough. That's more than enough." The manager appeared beside their booth, nervous and sweating. Mike was a good guy, but he knew who Benjamin Hale was. Everyone in Chicago knew who Benjamin Hale was. "Grace is everything. Should I call someone?" Grace looked at Benjamin. Then at the $10 bill still sitting on the table, wrinkled now from being held and rejected and held again. Then at Maria, watching from the counter with her 3 kids' futures hanging in every tip jar. At Denise, juggling nursing school textbooks and orders. At Jenny, counting the days until her mother's visa came through. "No, Mike. Everything's fine." The manager retreated, but slowly, keeping one eye on the booth like he expected trouble. Benjamin stood, pulling out his wallet. This time he placed $500 bills on the table. Fresh, crisp. The kind of money that could change a week, a month, a quarter of a year. "For the meal and your time, no strings. Whether you accept what I'm about to propose or not, you earned this." Grace stared at the money. $3,000. More than she made in 2 months of double shifts and aching feet. Rent, groceries, new tires for her dying car, the electric bill, the water bill, the medical debt that never stopped growing even though the cancer was gone. All right there. 5 pieces of paper that could buy her breathing room. She picked up the bills, folded them neatly, felt their weight, their possibility, their promise, and placed them back in Benjamin's hand. "Sir, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't accept this. Not the money on this table, and not whatever you're planning in that will of yours." Benjamin's eyebrows rose. "Why not?" "Because I don't want to be someone who got lucky because a rich man felt guilty. I want to be someone who earned their way." Grace's voice was steady now, certain. You said your wife taught you that the measure of a person is what they do with nothing. Well, I'm still measuring up. I'm still choosing to stay true to that, even now. Especially now. For a long moment, Benjamin just stared at her, then he started laughing. Deep, genuine laughter that shook his shoulders and brought tears to his eyes, and made the other diners turn to see what could possibly be so funny in a conversation that had looked so serious. "Oh, Sarah," he whispered to the ghost of his dead wife, to the memory of a woman who'd chased him down a Pittsburgh street with his bus fare. "She's perfect. She's exactly who you would have chosen." He pressed the money back into Grace's palm, closing her fingers around it with surprising strength for a dying man. "Keep it. You earned it with your time and your honesty, but know this, the addendum stands. I called my lawyer during our conversation. Marcus. Good man, if a bit stuffy. I had him draft papers making you the director of a foundation. $2.4 billion. Sarah Hale Foundation. You won't own it. You'll manage it. You'll decide how every penny gets spent. But you'll earn a salary, a fair one. You'll work harder than you ever have. You'll be paid what you're worth. No charity, just responsibility." Grace's heart was hammering. "Sir, when I die, and I will die soon, you'll receive papers from Marcus. You'll have a choice then, too. Accept it or refuse it. But Grace Thompson, either way, you've already given me something worth more than $2.4 billion. What's that? Hope. That people like you still exist in this world. That Sarah's kind of integrity didn't die with her. That money hasn't corrupted everything it touches." He smiled, sad and grateful. "You gave an old dying man hope. That's worth more than anything I could give you?" The funeral was massive. Chicago's elite filled the cathedral, wearing expensive black and fake tears and calculating their inheritances like actuaries measuring loss. Benjamin Hale's children gave speeches about a father they barely knew, reading words written by speech coaches and PR teams. Business partners praised a man who destroyed them for sport, smiling through their relief that he was finally gone. Grace sat in the back row in a dress she'd borrowed from Maria, holding the envelope Marcus had sent her the day after Benjamin died. She hadn't opened it yet. Around her, Chicago society played its games. She watched Elizabeth Hale, Benjamin's daughter, check her phone during the eulogy. Watched Richard Hale, Benjamin's son, schmooze with board members already planning their moves. Watched lawyers and accountants and executives treat death like a business opportunity. And she thought about a $10 bill, about a test she hadn't known she was taking, about an old man searching for something he'd lost 23 years ago on a hospital bed. After the service, Marcus found her in the crowd. 60 years old, gray suit, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Miss Thompson, we need to talk about Mr. Hale's will." "I know. You haven't opened the envelope." "I know. May I ask why?" Grace looked around at the gathering, at Benjamin's children already calculating their inheritance, at business partners already plotting their next moves, at a room full of people who saw Benjamin's death as an opportunity, not a loss. "Because the moment I open it, everything changes. And I wanted one more moment where I was just Grace. Just a waitress who made a choice because it was right, not because there was money involved. Does that make sense?" Marcus smiled gently. "Mr. Hale said you'd say something like that. He left specific instructions for this moment." He pulled out a smaller envelope, weathered and old, the paper soft like it had been carried in a pocket for years, opened and closed and opened again. "He said to give you this first." Grace took it. The paper was warm, like it had been held close to someone's heart. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, a young woman in a waitress uniform, laughing at a man in worn jeans and a too big smile. Both were young, broke, and clearly in love. The kind of love that doesn't calculate worth or measure value. The kind that just is, and written on the back in Benjamin's shaking handwriting. "This is Sarah. April 1973. The day she gave me back my quarter. The day she taught me that pride is priceless. She'd have liked you, Grace. She'd have been proud to know her money went to someone who understood what it cost to earn dignity. Don't do this for me. Do it for all the Sarahs out there, the ones working double shifts, fighting cancer, choosing pride over paychecks. Build something that matters. Be someone who doesn't forget. That's all I ask. That's all she would have asked. You already passed the test. Now comes the work." Benjamin Grace's hands trembled as she read it again, then again. Finally, she opened the legal envelope. Inside wasn't what she expected, not billions, not ownership, not an empire. It was a trust, a foundation. Set up in Sarah Hale's name, worth $2.4 billion, and Grace wasn't the owner. She was the director, the decision maker. The one who would decide how every penny got spent, who had helped where it went. but she'd earn a salary. $85,000 a year. Good money, fair money, not wealth, work. At the bottom of the document, another note. You didn't want charity, Grace, so I'm giving you the hardest job in the world, caring for people the way Sarah cared for me. Use this money to help waitresses pay their medical bills. Use it to fund programs for people fighting cancer. Use it to make sure no one has to choose between pride and survival. You'll work harder than you ever have. You'll be paid fairly. And every morning you'll wake up knowing you earned your way. I kept my promise. You never have to accept pity, only responsibility. If you refuse this, the money goes to my children who will waste it in 5 years. So I guess the real question is, are you brave enough to do the hard thing instead of the easy thing? Are you brave enough to honor Sarah, to honor yourself, to prove that some people still believe in working for what matters? Grace stood in the cathedral, surrounded by wealth and waste, holding a photograph of a dead woman and a responsibility that could crush her. And she realized Benjamin Hale hadn't tested her with that $10 bill. He'd given her the only gift that mattered, a choice. The same choice Sarah had given him all those years ago on a Pittsburgh sidewalk, the choice to stand up, to matter, to prove that some things are worth more than money. She thought about the eviction notice, about the debt collectors, about the dying car and the empty bank account and the future that looked like a tightrope stretched over an abyss. She thought about Maria's kids, about Denise's dream of becoming a nurse, about Jenny's mother waiting for a visa, about every waitress, every worker, every person fighting to survive with dignity intact. She thought about her own fight, about waking up after surgery with nothing but debt and determination, about choosing to stand when falling would have been easier, about believing that survival was worth the cost even when the price seemed too high. And she thought about Benjamin Hale, dying alone in a mansion, testing strangers because he'd lost everyone who'd ever really known him. About Sarah, dead 23 years but still teaching lessons from beyond the grave. About love that survives death and integrity that outlasts wealth. She folded the papers, slipped them into her borrowed purse and walked out of the cathedral. Behind her, Benjamin's children were already arguing with lawyers. Business partners were already forming alliances. The vultures were circling the corpse of his empire. But Grace Thompson, the waitress who'd handed back $10 because she didn't need pity, walked into the cold Chicago afternoon with something none of them would ever understand. Purpose. And it came at a price. Every morning for the rest of her life, she'd have to earn it. She'd have to work, decide, struggle, fight. She'd have to look at people's suffering and choose how to help. She'd have to manage billions without letting it corrupt her. She'd have to stay Grace while everyone would try to make her someone else. But that was exactly how she wanted it. Because Benjamin Hale had taught her one final lesson in that diner: you can't buy integrity. You can't purchase character. You can't acquire dignity. You can only choose it, every day, every moment, every time someone offers you the easy path and you take the hard one instead. 6 months later, the Sarah Hale Foundation opened its doors. Grace Thompson sat in a modest office, not the executive suite lawyers had suggested. Just a simple room with a desk and a window and a photograph of a young couple in love despite being broke. The first grant went to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Medical debt forgiveness for service workers, waitresses, janitors, security guards, people who kept the world running while the world barely noticed. The second grant funded cancer treatment for people without insurance. Because Grace remembered what it felt like to choose between medicine and rent, between survival and dignity. The third grant created a scholarship for children of service workers, because Maria's kids deserved the same chances as Billionaire's children. And every day, when Grace signed checks and approved grants and made decisions about billions of dollars, she kept that original $10 bill in her desk drawer. Benjamin had left it in his will, specifically requested it be given to her. On it, he'd written one final message. This is what started it all, what ended it all, what proved that the most valuable thing in the world can't be bought. Thank you for teaching an old fool what his wife tried to show him decades ago. Money is a tool, not a trophy. Use it well. Use it wisely. Use it like Sarah would have. Like you would have. 3 years after Benjamin's death, Grace was invited to speak at a business conference. She stood at the podium in a simple black dress, nice but not designer, and looked out at an audience of millionaires and billionaires and people chasing wealth like it was oxygen. I want to tell you about the most expensive thing I ever refused, she said, and she told them the story, the diner, the $10, the dying billionaire who'd tested her without her knowing. The choice that changed everything. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one person started clapping, then another. Then the whole room erupted. But Grace noticed the people who weren't clapping, the ones who looked uncomfortable, the ones who would have taken the $10, taken the $3,000, taken anything offered without questioning the cost to their souls. And she understood Benjamin's test better than ever. It's easy to have integrity when you're comfortable, when your bills are paid and your future is secure. The real test comes when you're drowning, when you're desperate, when accepting help would be so easy and refusing it costs everything. That's when you learn who you really are. That's when character reveals itself. After the speech, a young woman approached her, maybe 25, wearing a catering uniform under a borrowed jacket. "Miss Thompson, I just wanted to say, I'm a waitress. And last week a customer left me a $5 tip on a $100 check, and I wanted to throw it back in his face, but I needed the money, I took it, and I felt small." Grace looked at her, really looked at her, and saw herself 4 years ago. Desperate, proud, fighting. "What's your name?" "Sophie." "Sophie, you did what you had to do to survive. That's not weakness, that's strength." Grace reached into her purse, pulled out a business card. "The Sarah Hale Foundation is hiring. We need people who understand what it means to serve, what it means to struggle, what it means to choose dignity even when it costs you. Come see me Monday." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Because someone once gave me a chance when I had nothing to offer but integrity, and I learned that the measure of a person isn't what they do with abundance, it's what they do with nothing." Sophie took the card with shaking hands. And Grace thought about Benjamin Hale, dead 3 years but still teaching lessons. About Sarah Hale, dead 26 years but still changing lives. About the long chain of people choosing integrity over ease, character over comfort, dignity over dollars. That's the real legacy, not buildings or businesses or bank accounts. It's the choice, made over and over, every day, every moment, every time you stand at a crossroads and choose the hard right over the easy wrong. Grace walked out of that conference center into the Chicago evening, and somewhere in the space between Earth and whatever comes after, she felt Benjamin Hale smiling. Because she'd learned the lesson. The real one. The only one that mattered. Some things are priceless, and the moment you put a price on them, you've already lost everything that matters. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button right now. Subscribe to Emotional Stories channel for more amazing, heartfelt stories that will make you cry, make you smile, and remind you what really matters. We post new powerful stories every day. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and remember, always be kind. You never know who needs it.